in Britain, and it's known normally as a crisis of capitalism. The sufferers inevitably are members of the working class. And as comrades who are committed to Marxist philosophy, we ought to be very clear that we only recognise that there are two classes inside this society. And that a class is determined by its relationship to the means of production. That's as true today as it was when Marx and Engels first began to work on the manifesto of the Communist Party and work on the whole concept of what was required to change. If you work by hand or by brain, then you are a member of the working class. If you own and control industry, services, supply, then you're a member of the ruling class. And once we understand that, as socialists and as Marxists, then we begin to understand the need to convey our views in a way which is fundamentally different from all other political parties. I think we should start by saying there is now a common consensus in Britain, even amongst the right wing, that there is no difference, apart from probably a cigarette paper, between Labour, or New Labour, the Liberal Democrats and the Conservative Party. All three are struggling for what they term as the, quotes, middle ground, unquote. What they really mean is that they want a policy that fits in with international globalisation policy and fits in with Britain's commitment, their commitment, not ours, to the European Union, previously known as the European Common Market. Members will recall that it's not all that long ago that we were being told in very, very positive terms that the European Common Market was merely a market so that we could protect our industries and services within a market system and in that way plan the way ahead. Although the architects of the European Common Market made plain that it was a political union and not just an economic union. It's now spread so that we've got, 27 countries who are committed to the European Union. And much of our independence in terms of our taxation policy, our rights in terms of our laws, our rights in terms of our economic policy, our immigration policy, and a whole range of other things have effectively been transferred from Britain, from the electorate, to the European Union. And until and unless we begin to understand that that has taken place and is continuing to take place, we will not understand how we can fight back and reverse that policy. Now there is a view, and I make no apologies for saying this, that unites the right wing and the ultra-left wing, which we would normally term as the Trotskyists. They are all in favour of being part and parcel of some kind of movement. One on the extreme right of politics wants us to come out of Europe and be a little England or a little Britain. The Trotskyists, on the other hand, want us to be part of Europe in the hope that we can transform the whole of Europe into a socialist state. Conveniently ignoring, of course, the fact that just one vote, one state saying no, means that you couldn't change a thing. The only way and the only solution to the problem is to campaign for Britain's withdrawal from the European Union, to campaign for referendums on issues that come before the British people or should come before the British people, not merely on the latest treaty, but indeed on all the treaties that have been adopted, which have undermined all our freedoms and all our rights which have been won in centuries of struggle. I am constantly amazed at the views of so-called left-wing barristers, solicitors and members of the legal profession who say that if we can only embody the European legal system into the British system, look at the things that we will attain as a right. For example, equal pay, or equality on pensions, or equality on a whole range of different things. What they're conveniently ignoring is, why haven't we got this ability to do it as a working class here in Britain? We were the first to establish occupational pension funds. We were the first to get the kind of emancipation that people talk about. Limited though it may be, but at least we got the franchise for, first of all, men, and then eventually for women. And we began the advance in a way that was positive. In the process, we had, of course, to contend with those who were, and still are, social democrats. And they formed themselves into a movement, and it is a movement both inside and outside what is known as the Labour Party. And in the Labour Party, they have consistently done everything in their power on the right of that party to stop any advance that would result in a development of a socialist policy. There have been opportunities, much to the, I suppose, shock and horror on the part of the right of the Labour Party, where we have seen certain advances, and we shouldn't deny them. In the wake of the Second World War, such was the fury of the returning soldiers that they turned around and said, we've had enough. And they voted in a Labour government. And they voted in a Labour government which was committed to the most radical policy ever put forward before the British people in a general election. That policy called for the nationalisation, not necessarily common ownership, there's a difference, of the mining industry, of the steel industry, of the transport industry, of a whole range, a whole raft of industries in Britain. And the issues that were presented to the British people following the election of the Labour government resulted in fundamental changes, historic changes. And if we recall them for a second, it's worth taking on board exactly how far we've lost ground. For example, not only did we have the nationalisation of the mining industry, which incidentally had been supported even by the Tories, we also had the nationalisation of the steel industry, we had the nationalisation of the docks, we had the nationalisation of a whole range of facilities. We had at local level, of course, the municipal transport systems, like all the bus services in all the major towns and cities, with some exceptions, were owned and controlled by the people in the locality. They belonged to them. And we had also something which was unique. We had for the first time an introduction of a National Health Service that provided, at the time of need and upon demand, access to healthcare.